For years now at QSM, we've been watching the evolution of Agile methodologies, and we've been enhancing our tools and methods to fit with what's new and unique about these methods. I'm pleased to spend this time with you today to show you some of what we've observed and learned. We'll start by looking at some key Agile principles, and then discuss what do we estimate and the importance of planning a release in Agile organizations. We'll look at several considerations for estimation, including the size of the project, the shape of the work, milestones, and productivity and effort. Look at project tracking and control, and then we'll be able to take your questions. Let's looking briefly at some key principles and practices of Agile methods. I've selected these because they guide the thinking about estimation. I'll go over these quickly now, but we'll see their import throughout today's webinar. Providing software that brings value to its sponsors and users has been a focus since Agile Methods began on the mountain in Utah 15 years ago. That puts the focus on the consumers, not the developers. Two key consequences of this are using value assessment to determine development order and quick delivery, but making sure that what's delivered can actually be consumed. This aspect of Agile methods is that development is done in short, time-boxed sprints or iterations. The key thing here is that the length of each sprint is the same throughout the project. We used to see 6 to 8 week sprints years ago, and that changed to 3 or 4 week sprint length, and now we commonly see projects that choose 2 or even 1 week sprints. Short sprints enable getting frequent feedback. Since the sprints are a fixed length, we use that to describe the duration. Instead of saying it's a 6-month project, we can say we expect to have 15 sprints. The biggest benefit of Agile methods is the ability to deal with change. We embrace change. By making decisions as late as possible, we are making them with the most current information based on changing conditions and especially what we've learned through the frequent feedback we've gotten so far. But this idea that we embrace change be an excuse for not thinking things through carefully. Changing back and forth because we didn't think through decisions carefully at the point we made them causes unproductive churn in an Agile project just as in any other. Most facilitates embracing change is emergent requirements and design. The details of the requirements are only considered just in time when the requirements have bubbled up and need to be ready to develop. Thus, the choices and details are always based on the current thinking and what we've learned. Emergent requirements and design are probably the biggest differences from waterfall methods. There's no big upfront requirements and design phases and no signed-off documents that are then thrown over the wall. The business experts have to be involved throughout the project. The principle is that working software is the measure of progress. The stories developed and what's left to do are the measures of progress, and this means that at the end of each of those short sprints, the software must be whole, it must be working and tested, so we can review and get feedback on the new and enhanced function that was developed during that sprint. The term potentially shippable has been sometimes used to describe the level of quality needed at each sprint, but that term's easily misunderstood. We'll be discussing that term more later. Another aspect of this principle is that methodology steps like architecture reviewed or test plan completed, while they may be important, are not the primary measures of progress. Is the notion of definition of ready and the grooming of the backlog. This has become much more prominent in the last several years. It's a recognition that the quality of the requirements given to the development team each sprint is critical to maintain productivity and quality of the developed software. There's no upfront requirements phase. There's a comparable amount of work spread throughout the project that's needed to elicit the requirements that provide value. If the requirements are not thought through carefully, don't be surprised if the developed software has limited usefulness. With these principles in mind, let's see how to adapt estimation techniques to Agile methods. About what needs to be estimated in an Agile environment. Some Agilists have entire methodologies and techniques for Agile estimation. And on the other hand, we've seen discussion asking, do we need to estimate at all in Agile methods? As is often the case, these seemingly opposing sides come mostly from miscommunication, and in particular in this case, the same word, estimation, means two different things. We have to distinguish between the sprint level and the release level. Sprint, there are some decisions to be made, in particular, which specific stories will be developed in the next sprint. This decision process is often referred to as Agile Estimation in the literature. In contrast, when deciding whether to charter a project in the first place or a software release, you need an estimate of overall cost and duration to make decisions about the release. In particular, these release-level estimates are needed to choose which projects will provide the best return and to which you should apply the limited resources of your organization. The trade-offs of scope, cost, and duration. While the techniques may be adjusted because of Agile methods, these are the classic questions that require good estimates in order to answer them. Let's look briefly at those sprint-level decisions. The duration of each sprint in the project will be the same, and sticking to that time box provides a cadence for feedback and adjustment. The cadence is chosen, not estimated. Things to decide at each sprint. Given the feedback we've received, what should we change and improve on? And then in particular, what's the next set of stories to develop? Will get very good at making these short-term decisions. They have the direct knowledge needed to make them. We'll talk a lot about the nonlinearities of software projects as a whole that make release estimation difficult, but these nonlinearities don't surface in a short 2-week sprint. People get very good at figuring out on their own what's next. When making decisions about release plans, the questions are very different. They are about deciding how to apply limited organizational resources and which projects bring the most value for the cost. Questions like, should we increase cost in order to save time? Or, how long will it take to develop enough valuable features to release? When we talk at estimation about at QSM, these release level questions are what we're talking about. To understand this contrast, let's think through a bit more what we mean by release. I'm not going to give you a formal definition, but a release comprises enough new and enhanced functionality to be of value. You can expect it to be delivered and consumed by actual users to be put into production. It's not just for review purposes, so it has to have enough functionality that it's fully useful, and it has to go through whatever steps are needed to get it into production. It's actually shippable. This brings us back to the term that's sometimes used, potentially shippable. Don't we have potentially shippable software ready at each iteration? We chose the highest priority, presumably highest value functionality to add to each sprint. We tested and we have high quality working software. Doesn't this mean that the software at each sprint is ready to release? Well, remember the purpose of the software at each sprint. It's to see that we made progress and to get good feedback on that progress and learn from what we've done. While we are making progress towards a consumable release at each sprint, we've not necessarily gotten there yet. There's a technical aspect of this that's very important. In order to stick to the time box, we have to choose small enough chunks of functionality